As the Denver Broncos continue in NFL free agency, who are some free agents we'd still like them to potentially sign if the price is right? Potential reunions we'd also like to see. You'll get that on today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's happening, Broncos country? Welcome into a brand new episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much, Broncos country, for tuning in and making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day. To get the latest episode as soon as it's available, subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. This episode of Locked On is brought to you by the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya. The Nissan Ariya, the EV for people who love to drive. Learn more at nissanusa.com. I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports, joined alongside, as always, by my co-host, Sayre Bedinger. While free agency continues, you never know when a move is going to happen. On the last episode of the show, we talked about maybe making a big splash at Darius Slay. The moment we got done recording and we got it published and uploaded, the news happened and he was going to stay with the Philadelphia Eagles. So, free agency, bear with us, folks. We always like to record the episodes. We like to make sure we have all the information possible. We'll have you covered and up to date with everything here on the show. I mean, Sayre, let's talk about it as well as we await some rumblings. There are some rumors going on surrounding the Broncos. We'll get to that in a little bit. But let's just take a general look at maybe some free agents that we would like Denver to sign if the price is right, with some positions of need in consideration.
That's right. And there's plenty of guys out there to be considered. And in the spirit of prices, right, Cody? I mean, who are we going to ask to come on down in this episode, right? I say first and foremost, hey, Foster Moreau, come on down. Let's go. I would love to see. I know the Broncos brought in Chris Manhertz at the tight end position, but I'm going to start off this kind of, like I said, I told you this. I told all you listeners, I like to be greedy when it comes to free agency, right? And I'm not saying the Broncos should just up and replace everybody that has potential on the roster, but Albert Okwuegbunam, he's going into the last year of his rookie contract. And I think that, you start to think about this Broncos team. It looks like they're going to be using quite a bit of 12 personnel. Looks like they're going to be utilizing a fullback, obviously. And I think that if you have that, maybe you need more tight ends that can block really well in the lineup. We know Greg Dulcich, he's going to be like a big wide receiver out there. We know he's going to be asked to block, but there's other guys that could be, more prominent blockers. And I think Foster Moreau would be somebody. He was just great with the Las Vegas Raiders, Cody, in terms of being kind of an all-around dual threat at the tight end position. We talked on yesterday's episode about how the Broncos said goodbye to Eric Saubert. We feel like the addition of Chris Manhertz means, Eric Tomlinson probably going to be going somewhere else this season. What if you bring in Foster Moreau? If the price is right, you bring him in, you pair him up with Dulcich. Those are your top two tight ends. And then Chris Manhertz comes in. When you say, hey, we're going to pound the rock, maybe you split Greg Dulcich out, and play him out wide. Or maybe you just go a little bit heavier at the tight end position. I think having Moreau and Chris Manhertz could really upgrade this Broncos roster from the standpoint of, hey, we want to run the ball a lot, but Moreau gives you more upside in the passing game than somebody like Chris Manhertz.
I agree with you there, and I even think I want to take it a step further here. Moreau is a balanced guy, right? He's good at blocking. He's good at pass protection in terms of the blocking department as well as helping in the run game, but he's also a pretty underrated wide receiver. I remember there were a couple of games over the last few years where Foster Moreau's made like a big catch on third down, right, to keep a drive alive for the Raiders. And then, Josh Jacobs did the rest. Foster Moreau was a big part of what they wanted to do. I'm sure if that were to happen, we could get some more intel from your boy Q. He's our boy Q of Locked On Raiders, but I like that. I think that's an underrated move. Right now, Denver has 3 tight ends. I think you need to carry 4, the possibility of 5, at least on your 90-man roster going into training camp. So still some room to make, and it's not going to be like a big level, big money deal that would be like game-changing. Foster Moreau actually might fit the bill here. So I like that suggestion. I'm going to throw this out there, right, because, with all the rumors going on about trading wide receivers, if Denver makes a trade for a wide receiver, they're really aggressive toward a guy like Allen Lazard. If they trade a wide receiver and it frees up cap space, maybe use that money to go pursue Odell Beckham Jr. as a prolific playmaker. As you and I have stated on this podcast before, Russell Wilson has recruited him before. Sean Payton has had some interest in OBJ in the past. And now you have those two dynamics there. I'm sure there's a connection. I know you were frustrated, and rightfully so, that Denver did not have anybody at his workout in Arizona. Maybe they didn't need it. Maybe they knew all they needed to know, and maybe this could be an under-the-radar thing with the Russell Wilson connection in terms of recruiting. He could certainly do that.
It could very well be exactly what you just said. Like, maybe the Broncos just feel like, hey, we know everything we need to know. And that could mean either they're for sure not going to sign him or that they would actually consider it. But one way or another, I think, especially if you make a wide receiver trade, this is something that you have to consider, right? And I know a lot of people have been on my back about this, you know, the whole Odell Beckham thing. People are saying, well, no, he's cooked, his knees, this, that, and the other. And I just think
good.
It's a risk worth. He does. He looks really good. And it's a risk worth taking, man. I mean, he's a former superstar receiver in this league who's 30 years old. And look, like, I get it. The Broncos have had plenty of injury problems at the receiver position. They've dealt with guys not being available. And that may be the case. Like, if you sign Odell Beckham Jr., you're probably not getting 17 games, right? But as we saw with the Los Angeles Rams a couple seasons ago, if you can get him healthy down the stretch run, look what he can do to help your team in December, in January, even obviously in the Super Bowl where he scored the first touchdown and was looking like, I mean, unguardable out there at times. So I think definitely Odell Beckham Jr. is somebody, if the price is right, on a 2-year deal to split up the, you know, the cap hit or whatever, however you want to do that, sign him to a 2-year deal and really allow him to go out there and be himself in your offense. I think he'd be a great fit for Sean Payton. I think Payton could manage, you know, obviously he's a big personality, right? But I think his personality type is such that Sean Payton's been around all different types of guys. And I think that that's something that he could definitely handle. So I still think Odell Beckham may end up, when all is said and done, Cody, I think he may end up being the best wide receiver acquisition of the offseason, depending on obviously how much he plays. But that's a risk that you take in free agency with just about anybody. There's probably 2 or 3 reasons why guys always hit free agency. And one out of those 3 reasons is these guys just don't stay healthy often enough, right? That's why teams let them hit free agency. So most of the time when you're signing somebody, they have some kind of injury concern from the past. But I wouldn't stop at Odell Beckham Jr. either, Cody. We know the Broncos, is their offensive line completely solidified? Are they going with an incumbent like Lloyd Cushenberry or Luke Wattenberg at center, or could they sign maybe one of the big names still available?
I know we've talked about Ben Jones, Connor McGovern. I want to hit back to OBJ real quick. The guy that he trains with in the offseason is obviously Jamal Liggin. Tim Patrick trains with him as well. So maybe, look, if Cortland Sutton is traded, you do have a wide receiver core. Like, if OBJ's still trying to come along a little bit, you have him, you have Tim Patrick, you have KJ Hamler, you have Jerry Jeudy. I mean, that's not a bad wide receiver room. So I wanted to throw that out there. We would see, like Connor McGovern, you and I talked about this on a previous episode, you know, he's strong, he's anchored. And our biggest, I'd say, complaint and criticism of Lloyd Cushenberry has been he just lacks the upper body strength in a sense to maintain, because teams attack inside the A-gap, or they have consistently so far throughout his career on his rookie deal. He is under contract. We'll see where things lie on that. But, you know, there's also some other things we'll throw out there as well as we talk about on today's episode. Locked On Broncos, what are some potential reunions that could be in store here in Broncos country? You'll get that on today's episode of the show. This episode of the show is brought to you by our friends over there at Built Bar. And as you know, it is March Madness. Well, let me tell you about this. You love Built Bar. It's also Built March Madness here at the Locked On Podcast Network. And we know you have a favorite bar or puff, and now's your time to make it count. Go to BuiltMarchMadness.com to vote for your favorites. And when you vote for your favorite bar or your puff, you will be entered into a drawing where 50 lucky Locked On listeners will get a free box of Built. Not only that, but one Locked On fan will receive a 12-month subscription to Built to have Built's best bars or puffs delivered monthly straight to your doorstep. You got to try Built. Built is the best protein bar ever. Seriously, they're so amazing. You won't think that they're good for you. And what makes Built bars and puffs so good? Well, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. They're high in protein and low in sugar. So run to BuiltMarchMadness.com right now to vote for your favorite bar or puff and pick up a box while you're there. You can vote every day in March, so hop in and support your pick. What are some potential reunions we'd like to see for the Denver Broncos in NFL free agency? Whether that's a former friend or somebody who is an unrestricted free agent that could make their way back to Denver. Thank you so much, Broncos Country, for tuning in and making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day. You can get the show free and available everywhere you get your podcast. You can also get us on YouTube as well, so make sure you subscribe so you never miss out on an episode when it's made available. Let's continue on the conversation here. In terms of reunions, right? We were just talking about the price is right with free agent acquisitions, but what if the price were right for a potential player who is an unrestricted free agent to return, or maybe some former friends returning after spending 2022 with a brand new team? Sayre, I want to start things off by talking about P.J. Locke. Now, while there's been rumors, there's been rumblings of C.J. Gardner-Johnson, P.J. Locke has yet to sign, as the time that we're recording this here on Thursday morning, has yet to sign with another team. And I think that there are a multitude of reasons why it would make sense to bring him back into the fold for the Broncos this upcoming season.
Right. He would be necessary depth at safety at this point right now, right? You got Caden Stearns, Justin Simmons, and really, I mean, that's it right now. So you need to have some more depth at that position group, of course, but also special teams, right? We can't neglect special teams. PJ Locke has the ability to go out there and be a key player for you in that phase of the game, but he can also play a versatile role for the defense. And we kind of saw that, from last year in the preseason into the start of the regular season. Obviously, he made the big play against the 49ers. So I would not be opposed to seeing PJ Locke come back. I know there's been a lot of talk of Kareem Jackson reunion in Denver, and that makes sense as well. But hey, why not PJ Locke, right? I mean, this team has overseen his development over the last handful of years. I'm sure Christian Parker would love to have him back in that defensive backs room.
I mean, he's good for it as well. I know you have Delarian Turner-Yell, but the thing is he going to be a better special teams player for you than a PJ Locke? And I don't know if that's where he's at yet, right? You want to see him continue on that growth trajectory, but also for PJ since 2019 has gotten better every single year. He's been trending upward, which ideally, when you're talking about developmental talent, you want the guys to trend upward. Those are the guys you were going to rely on. And PJ, obviously the top special teams player in many facets, led the team in tackles last season for Denver in terms of the special teams side of the ball. In my opinion, I think you got to bring PJ back. Now, this one's a little interesting. This guy didn't spend 2022 at Denver Broncos. He wanted to before the Russell Wilson trade. Shelby Harris is available after being released by the Seattle Seahawks. We know that Denver signed Zach Allen. But here's the thing. With Deshaun Williams, who was the starting defensive end opposite of Draymond Jones, departing for Carolina, Denver lost both their starting defensive ends. They have Zach Allen, but the question is, do you feel like Matt Henningsen or Inyoma Uwazurike are ready to start at defensive end opposite of Zach Allen next to DJ Jones and Mike Purcell? That, to me, Sayre, is a huge question, which makes, in my opinion, I wouldn't be opposed because we know George Payton really loves Shelby Harris.
Right. The Broncos gave him that extension back in 2021, right? When they signed him to the 3-year deal. And obviously he didn't get to see the entire life of that contract, but you could see, I mean, watching Shelby Harris's press conference after he signed that contract, Cody, you could see how much it meant to him that the Broncos valued him in such a way, right? I mean, he had kind of bounced around with the Cowboys and the Raiders early on in his career. But remember, it was in 2017 when Vance Joseph really gave him his first shot to start on a full-time basis in the NFL. And I think that means something to these guys, especially a guy like Shelby Harris, to where, like, you could tell, especially after that Seahawks game to start last season, like, you could tell he's a guy that it means a lot to, like, the personal aspect of football does mean a lot to him, right? It meant a lot to him to be included in that trade because he saw that as, well, they see me as somebody that's, a tradable asset. And obviously I think he loved and enjoyed kind of sticking it to the Broncos right there. And he gave the little let's ride and all that stuff. I mean, you got to appreciate Shelby for enjoying the moment, obviously, but I don't think that means that he would never come back to Denver. I think that
he loves Denver. He still lives here.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think he loves it. I think that he would welcome the chance to come back, especially, to play with some of his old buddies who are obviously, all those guys are still there for the most part, and get the chance to play again for Vance Joseph, who, again, like I said, gave him that opportunity in 2017 to really get his feet wet as a full-time starter in the NFL.
I ran into Shelby in Phoenix at the Super Bowl, sat down and interviewed him, talked with him, caught up. It was great to see him. I mean, he had no idea that Seattle was going to release him, right? So when we were talking, he said, I love Denver. My family still lives in Denver. I live in Denver, he said, in the offseason because that's where my home is. And I think for where Shelby is at this point in his career as well, it makes sense. And I'll go back to the notion, when the Seahawks wanted George Paton, like, it was hard for George to include Shelby in there because George just signed him to a contract extension. You think George Paton wanted to get rid of a guy he just put in terms of an extension? No, Seattle wanted him. That was hard for George Paton, and now everything kind of aligns, as you mentioned, the ties to Vance Joseph. We remember the first opportunity. What did it come from? It came from special teams. He blocked Younghoe Koo's field goal attempt that would have gave the Chargers that win. You know, when Trevor Siemian was still the quarterback, he juked Joey Bosa, scored a touchdown. I mean, God, interesting times in Broncos country. It's crazy to think how far we've come since then, though. Shelby coming back to Denver, I would love to see that if the price is right. I'm sure Shelby would as well. Let's take a look at maybe somebody nobody thought, right? We talked about the center position, maybe some free agents. What if Graham Glasgow comes back, right? Because they released him from his previous contract to free up cap space. That doesn't mean he can't sign a new contract that isn't anywhere close to the price range in which he would have accounted for this season. And he's a pretty stable guy. I thought he demonstrated reliability at that position last season. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on Glasgow as a potential option?
I wouldn't mind it, honestly. We're talking about this center market as being, hey, go after Ben Jones, go after Evan Brown, maybe Connor McGovern. But Graham Glasgow is also out there, and he's an option. Like, if you want to go into this draft class looking to pick somebody that could be a long-term starter at the center position, I think Glasgow's the kind of guy that, hey, you bring back for another year, let him man the position or let him battle with Cushenberry or something, draft a guy that you like. I don't see any downside to that, really, especially as we're talking about all these moves. You got to consider if the price is right. Of course, we're not sitting here saying the Broncos should go out and spend a ton of money to bring all these guys in. No, if the price is right, consider these moves, right? So Graham Glasgow, if the price is right, Cody, I'd be okay bringing him back.
Come on down. Now, this is going to be another interesting one, right? Because we were looking at it initially. He was a restricted free agent. Brett Rippon may be coming back to Denver, right? Are you opposed to that? Because you and I think are on the same kind of boat of saying, hey, Denver needs to have 3 quarterbacks on their roster. You make an interesting point. If he can't find quarterback 2 opportunities elsewhere, can he come back as a quarterback 3 option in Denver? I know he would like to. I know that he wanted to see things through here in Denver when the team started turning things around, and I wouldn't be opposed if he's your 3rd quarterback option.
Absolutely. I would say definitely he's an asset to your quarterback room. He's somebody who's obviously played. So if it does come to the point of him actually playing in a game, right, as we see a number of teams every year have to get down to their 3rd quarterback, I wouldn't be opposed to this at all, just especially because he could be kind of just another voice in that quarterback room to see things that maybe other guys aren't seeing, right? Obviously, Jarrett Stidham's still a young player. I believe he and Brett Rippon came in the same rookie class in 2019 as well. So that's, to me, I just value having that kind of guy in the room. You could still draft a guy and then go through training camp, preseason, and say, hey, we like these 3 arms the best. But I do think you need to give yourself options and opportunities to keep 3 guys that you really like and that you really want to build around. Obviously, Jarrett Guarantano, who we don't talk a lot about because we don't really know a lot about him as in terms of what he brings to the table as a player. He kind of gets he's kind of become an afterthought in the discussion, but he's another option there. But I wouldn't mind seeing Brett Rippon come back.
Well, Broncos country, we are always eager for your thoughts. If there could be any potential reunions in store from any unrestricted free agents or former Broncos available on the free agency market, what do you have in mind? Let us know in the YouTube comments down below. You can always tweet us if you're listening on your favorite audio podcasting platform, at Cody Roark NFL, at Sayre Bedinger, at Locked On Broncos. We're going to take a look at some other free agents that have some ties to maybe some coaches, some other players, or just history against the Denver Broncos. We're going to continue that conversation on today's episode of the show. This episode is brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel. And the midway point of the NBA season is here. Now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because new customers, they get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, it's secure, it's super easy to use. You can navigate it pretty efficiently. That's one thing I've always found great about it. It makes it an easy user experience for me, and it will for you as well. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay where you can bet on everything from the money line to points scored and threes drained in a game from your favorite three-point shooter. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Some other NFL free agents the Broncos could take a look at in terms of connections with maybe former coaches. We take a look at players who have maybe excelled against the Denver Broncos. If the price is right, come on down. Thank you so much, Broncos Country, for tuning in and making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. Once again, make sure you subscribe to this show on YouTube and your favorite podcasting provider, so anytime a new episode is made available, it gets delivered directly to you. Interact with folks in the YouTube comment section, like the video as well, and comment with your thoughts on this episode and share your Broncos analysis with everybody else in Broncos Country. Let's take a look at some options here, right? In terms of, we were just talking about defensive line depth. There's a tie to defensive line coach Marcus Dixon, who the Broncos value enough to bring him back after pretty much getting rid of the entire staff minus he and Christian Parker. Greg Gaines, this is a name we talked about initially leading up to free agency. He's still available as the time that we're recording this podcast.
He is still available, Cody, and I think that as of right now, I mean, I know we're barely one day and not even a full 24 hours into the new league year, so I say this not to be facetious or anything, but it does feel like a lot of time has really passed in free agency. It almost feels like we're into the second wave here, and I think somebody like Greg Gaines, you look at the defensive line market right now and how it's kind of formulating around the league. A lot of the high-priced guys went off the board early on. I think you could get somebody like Greg Gaines for maybe like a 3-year deal worth, I don't know, 14 to 16 million, something like that, maybe up to 18 million, depending on how crazy you're feeling. But I do think that you could get him for a very low cap hit in 2023. As the Broncos, we know their cap space is going down. There's ways that you can expand that, right? There's ways that you can increase your cap space if they need to do that. But I think Greg Gaines is somebody, as we talked about, you know, you want to have a rotation on that defensive line. You want to have guys that are able to come in, keep each other fresh, but also keep those edge rushers clean, right? And what does Greg Gaines, what does Zach Allen, what does DJ Jones, what do those guys really do? They command a lot of attention on the interior. So I think having guys like this, as many as you can get to command attention, keeps those edge rushers free to do what they do best.
It allows more pressure to be created. I like that idea there. Let's take a look at another option here, and this guy has been a Denver Broncos killer for the past season or two here, specifically in this past season. That is Jerick McKinnon. Obviously, the Kansas City Chiefs are proceeding forward with Isaiah Pacheco as their main running back option. Jerick McKinnon last year just absolutely destroyed Denver. Anytime like you had Patrick, you thought you had pressure on him, you're going to wrap him up. Shovel pass, left-handed pass, jump pass, Jerick McKinnon, screen game, touchdown. Like, he really impacted any of those matchups that Denver had there. And if Denver were, had the ability to contain him on a couple of those big plays, Denver might have beaten Kansas City last season, right? So, you already you brought in a guy in Michael Burton as your fullback who played for the Chiefs last year. Why not reunite that backfield together? Because Denver still needs another running back here. I think Jerick McKinnon would be a Swiss Army knife of all sorts alongside Samaje Perine. And if, in fact, Javonte Williams is not ready to go, you have a combination with these two guys with Perine and McKinnon that I think could excel for Sean Payton's offense.
I think so too, Cody. I feel kind of like a living meme here saying I am once again asking the Denver Broncos to sign Jerick McKinnon. I feel like the last couple of off seasons, I kind of you see the connection to George Paton. Of course, you see the fact that he's done extremely well for the Kansas City Chiefs, despite the fact that really he doesn't take many carries out of the backfield at all. He's basically a receiver for you. And that's something that I think could be very valuable to the Denver Broncos right now. There's not really a guy other than Tyler Beatty, who we saw. I mean, hey, his efficiency rate is extremely high at this point, right? His first ever NFL touch went for a big touchdown. But pass catching backs in Sean Payton's offense, Cody, what is that? That's the chef's kiss right there. We need some more of these guys. Jerick McKinnon, because of injuries in his past, I feel like he's got more in the tank now. Remember the 49ers, they signed him to a big contract back, I think almost right when Kyle Shanahan was signed, or maybe the second year that he was there as head coach. They brought him in to be their featured guy, and it never ended up working out because of injuries. But since he's been in Kansas City, you limit his usage to doing what he does best, which is catching passes. Man, what did he have last year? Like 9 or 10 touchdowns receiving, plus whatever else he had in the playoffs. To me, this is a guy that you bring in. I'm sure the Kansas City Chiefs would love to bring him in, but I wouldn't even stop there when you're looking at the running back position. Like I said, I'm kind of greedy here. If the price is right, What about somebody, Cody, like Devin Singletary from the Buffalo Bills? He is another really interesting name. As this running back market continues to unfold, we're seeing guys like Jamal Williams, Cody, who signed with the New Orleans Saints for, I mean, I don't even know if he got $1 million total on his contract per touchdown that he scored last season, right? I mean, he had 17 TDs. I don't even know if he got that much in millions of dollars. So the running back market is very team friendly. What do you say to Devin Singletary?
Not a bad option, right? Look, if Jerick McKinnon's out there and you have interest in him, I'd say definitely I would make a play for McKinnon over Singletary, but Singletary is a reliable little option out there too, has some speed dynamic to him, can catch out of the backfield, and also I think has some spring in his game as a rusher. You'd have to try to maybe identify, in my opinion, I think Sean Payton, and he probably has already done this, right? I think George Payton, they've probably done this. What roles do we want these guys to have? Like as they're going through and they're talking about free agents that they're targeting or that they have signed, what role will they bring to the table? And Singletary, like I said, he might be one of those under-the-radar type guys. We'll see how things play out here for the Denver Broncos. We all know they need to add another running back. With George Payton saying that Javonte is on track, look, I trust that. And I think maybe that also might be something that puts, word out there to Javonte that, hey, we trust that you're going to be back, you're going to be ready, but if you're not, we're also going to take care of you. We're not going to rush you back. You have to do that with the stable of horses here in Denver, with the run game, with this whole identity being built around what Sean Payton and George Payton have already come out and indicated. We are going to build the trenches so we could pound the rock down your throat this upcoming season and then cut you with the passing game. Let's hope things open up that way here for the Broncos. But Broncos country, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode, Locked On Broncos. We'll have you covered every step of the way in NFL free agency. If there's a big-time move, you're going to get an emergency podcast as well. We appreciate you so much for rocking with us. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you could get the latest episode as soon as it's available. Sayre and I will see you tomorrow for a brand new episode, Locked On Broncos.